Hey, can you hear Shakayla?
Yes. Okay. I'm promoting you guys to panelists right now. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that just never happened, but
No, you're all good. That was super weird.
yeah, it was just like Ryder texted me and I was like, oh yeah, it's not working. Like, okay,
Oh,
perfect. Mary Claire, I also am gonna be recording this for you guys, so that
delightful.
you can have it. And so it is recording right now. And then we'll just give everyone a few minutes to hop on.
That's great. I don't know why it looks like I've joined twice.
I know. I was like, huh, I wonder if one of those is Kelsey, but
Yes, I think I made it. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I tried to join with the link that I got after registering, and I think I popped in for a minute, but I couldn't see anything. So
Oh,
glad I made it.
cool. Cool. Okay. Also I realized I think Shakayla and Kelsey would like for their video to be on. If you could do that.
yes, I can.
I don't want mine on.
Why won't it let me put y'all's video on for some reason? Okay, it should be able to now.
Yay.
Hey, Shakayla.
Hello.
Cute girls. Okay.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Sophie, by the way.
Hi, Sophie. Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Cool.
Mary Claire, do you want to give everyone about one more minute?
Oh, yes, that's perfect. And then, yeah, I'll just kick us off whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sophie Wise. I'm the Operations and Communications Manager here at the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. So we are super excited to partner with Mangum Holcomb Partners and Team SI to bring you guys, it's kind of a webinar series. So this is going to be the first of 4 in March, and then we're going to do 4 more in April. And so a little bit about Mangum Holcomb. They are one of Arkansas's largest full service marketing agencies, and they have been so great to basically pro bono their time and talk to all of these women-owned businesses here in Little Rock about social media best practices, marketing for your business, everything like that. And today we are going to be talking about organic social media best practices. We have Shakayla and Kelsey with us today, and they're kind of the social media gurus over at MHP. And so I'm going to go ahead and let them take over from here.
Thank you. Hi. Welcome, everybody. The introduction was perfect. I'm Kelsey. I'm here with my colleague Shakayla, and we're going to talk to you about everything social media. Our goal today is to try to make all that there is to know about social media a little bit more accessible and understandable and digestible, and hopefully give you some practical next steps, no matter where you are with your understanding of social media or with your brand's current social media presence.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Sophie. Can you open the screen share?
Sorry, guys, we're just doing all the things today. Okay, it should be good to go now.
Perfect. Let me share my screen.
Perfect. Good. We'll have a visual for you guys. And just so you know, this deck will be shared after the call, and included with all the information we're going to look at today is also a pretty extensive resource guide. So there will be links to everything we mentioned and some things that we did not mention today. So feel free to dig into that and then let us know if you have any additional questions. Just a little bit of background on who we are at MHP Team SI. We came to this webinar with a lot of experience. We're going to have a lot of different topics in the series, more than just social media marketing, because we are a full service marketing firm. We're actually a women-led marketing firm, and we have had a relationship with the Women's Foundation of Arkansas for nearly 10 years now. So this is a super exciting partnership for us, and we're so glad to be able to lend some of our expertise to all of you.
Yeah, so as Sophie kind of explained, we partnered with the Women's Foundation after they had surveyed you all months ago, and you had listed marketing support as one of your greatest needs as small business owners. And we knew that we could help, so we created this webinar series based on a couple of hot topic issues. They will be featuring stuff like digital media, web development, and of course, what we're doing today, organic social media. And following this, we will be offering an office hour with one of our experts. So if you're interested in diving in deeper in one of the topics of your choice, you'll have that option.
Just a little bit more background before we really get into the topic today. As I said, my name is Kelsey Blackman. I'm a senior account executive with MHP Team SI. I've been with the company for a little over 4 years now. My specialties are in inbound marketing, which is a style of marketing that is designed to be customer first and to really provide maximum value to your customers, so they start to look to you as solutions to their problems organically. I have a background in content production and campaign strategy, so if you want to nerd out about how all the elements of your marketing campaign or your social media can all work together in one big cohesive strategy and look good doing it, that's my favorite thing to talk about, and so please come to me during office hours.
Yeah, and my name is Shakayla Zoss. I'm a public relations specialist here at MHP Team SI. I offer the account executives PR support for our various clients in different industries. I'm also a graduate of the University of Arkansas, Little Rock. My background's more specifically in social media reputation management and organic content production. So if you're interested in learning more about public relations role in social media marketing, or how to manage your brand's reputation online, then you can contact me during my office hours. So now that you know a little bit more about us, we're going to start talking about social media marketing. Today, Kelsey and I are going to discuss various aspects of marketing with social media. We're going to talk about what you can do as small business owners to create and retain an engaged following and turn that following into lifelong customers. So we mapped out what's really in it for you and what we hope you take away from today's discussion. Some things that we hope that you take away are how to choose social media platforms based on your audience. We're going to go over how to create an engaged, relevant, and optimized content, how to do this often. We're also going to talk about the ins and outs of brand messaging and social media reputation management. And then we're going to discuss the best practices and agency insights for making the most out of your new branded social media presence.
So whether you're trying to start your social media presence from scratch or whether you've been participating online in the online conversation for a really long time, social media can kind of seem like a really big, daunting mountain of things you need to know and do perfectly in order to accomplish your goals. But what we wanted to do today is try to break all of the different things you might want to know about social media down into different levels of a hierarchy that make it a little bit more approachable for getting started. So this social media hierarchy is going to help you determine where you are in your social media journey and hopefully make that next step a lot more clear and a lot more achievable.
Yeah, so the first step of the hierarchy of social media is being present. So where your brand exists online matters, and it plays a crucial role in your social media strategy.
After you've chosen where you want to be, the next step is to be active. So these are going to be your fundamentals of social media. You're going to want to be consistent. That is the key to develop a following over time. And we're going to give you the practical tools of how to get started with your first schedule of social posts.
And then we have the next step as being intentional. This is where your brand goes from good to great. It's where you establish it, you make it more consistent, and you manage how it's perceived online.
And once you feel like you've mastered the perception of your brand, you're really consistent, you're getting into a rhythm, we want to teach you how to become a leader in social media. This is where you're not just mastering and participating in the trends, you're actually helping to create them, and you get to establish your brand as a thought leader in your industry.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about being present. Like I said, where your brand exists online is imperative, especially when it comes to pushing out content and reaching your desired audience. So we've all heard about the big players in social media: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. They have been dominating the social media game when it comes to small businesses. And as content creators and social media marketing managers, it's important for us to get a good understanding of where our audience already is before we begin mapping out a strategy. So a lot of you are probably wondering, where's Twitter? Well, Twitter is a great example for us to use to explain how the social media landscape is always changing. And even though a couple years ago we have included Twitter as one of our big players, we've started to see that Twitter is more about individuals and thought leaders, but that doesn't mean that your business won't have a lot of success on the platform. It's just important to note that no businesses, big players are going to be the same. And just because you mapped out that strategy now, it doesn't mean that it won't change in the future.
It's also worth noting that just because a social media platform that you're aware of is maybe not as large as some of the biggest players in the game right now, that doesn't mean it's not a viable choice for your business. The key is really to break down how there are similarities between the audiences of certain platforms and your audience for your customers, and start to make choices that align the two so you're investing your time and energy in being present where your audience already exists. So two big things that you need to take a look at. The first being the demographics of the platform. What we want to do is look for similarities between the users that we can measure on these existing platforms and your users, as we can measure that by your existing analytics and also your experience and intuition. So these numbers here are some examples of the key big players, but you can look at these metrics no matter what social media platform you are evaluating for your strategy. You can see that there are lots and lots of monthly users, and a lot of those users are United States adults. But you can also start to see things like age range and women, how often they're present on platforms versus men. This can be related to your products. If you have a target age demographic for your products or services that are a little bit younger or maybe a little bit more often female, you can take a look at how the platforms are aligning with your audience to make your choices on where you want to spend most of your time. The other factor that's very important is to figure out how the platform's content format and channels align with your products and services. So after you've decided where you think your audience exists, you also want to take a look at how they're consuming that content and see if that's a good opportunity to showcase your products. If you've got a very visual product, Instagram and YouTube may be a great solution. But if you have a product that maybe is difficult for your clients to understand sometimes, maybe it typically takes an in-person experience or perhaps a video to explain how the product is going to be beneficial or service, YouTube is probably your best option, but so could Facebook be. You want to take a look at all the different channels and also understand that the channels are going to be changing often. Instagram is a great example of this. If you look at the list of channels, it feels like it's ever growing. There's always a new opportunity to communicate on that platform. And a lot of times, not always, but most of the time, it's going to be better for your brand to try to pick fewer platforms and maximize all of their available channels to the best of your ability than it would be to stay on 4 platforms and only post newsfeed posts, as an example. So if something like Instagram is intimidating, maybe start there and try to really learn how each of the different channels like Reels or direct messages or IGTV or even lives could benefit you and your brand, and kind of maximize those independently. And then you can look to expand that content into other channels.
Yeah, so as Kelsey was saying, your audience plays a really important role in your social media strategy, and how you define your audience can help you choose which platforms you want to invest your time into. So now we're going to talk about how exactly you can determine your audience. So the first step to determining your audience is making a note of what you already know about the products you sell or the services you provide. For an example of this is if you are working in the makeup industry or you're selling makeup products, then maybe the majority of your audience can be categorized as women or other key demographics who are interested in makeup. So the next step, of course, is to take a look at what Kelsey was just describing, which is the demographics of the social platforms you use. And then from there, you can take a look at, if you're already on social media, most of the platforms will give you some insights to your followers and also your website analytics. After taking these steps, you should be able to get a pretty good look at who your audience is based on things like their gender identity, their age, their location, and even how they're accessing your social media platforms, or I'm sorry, your social media listings or your website, whether they're doing that on their phones or the desktop or their tablets.
And this is really important to take a peek at the data as well as comparing that to your experience and intuition, because sometimes these numbers will give you insight into audiences that you didn't even know that you had.
Yes, that's very true. And so basically, from there, what you can do is take these metrics and turn them into what we call a persona or a pretend ideal customer. This is a tool that we use to personify our marketing strategies in social media. So in this example, we are looking at Facebook, Instagram, and Google Analytics for one of our clients in the travel and tourism industry. And we're going to be making a persona for them. So taking these metrics that were on the previous screen, we're able to turn this into a persona. And we have identified that our ideal customer would be somebody who identifies as a woman who's in their mid-20s or late 30s, and of course resides in one of our key markets. So we created Tara. Tara is 32. She's a mom who lives in Arkansas and resides in the middle class. She manages her family's dispensable income and is the decision maker for her family's trips. And she's looking for a place that's not too far away from home, and offers fun activities that not only her kids will enjoy, but her and her significant other.
The exercise that's going to make a persona really powerful is by taking someone like Tara as our example and thinking about how she goes about her daily life consuming online content. Now, in the context of today's conversation, this is going to be mostly social media that we want to think about. But when we're thinking about any kind of marketing plan, if that's paid marketing across lots of channels or organic marketing across social media, we know that Tara is going to consume content in a variety of ways and in a variety of different times throughout her day. So we can imagine that someone like Tara is going to wake up pretty early, check the weather app on her phone to make sure she can properly prepare for the day. She's going to listen to local radio on the way to drop her kids off at school. And then whether she's clocking into the office afterwards or she's headed home to get started on the rest of her day, by 10 a.m., it's likely she's going to take a small break for social media to scroll, see what's going on in the world, check up on her notifications. And we know from the demographic information that it's very likely Facebook and Instagram will be a part of this routine. Later on in the morning, if she has been on something like Instagram, it's very likely that she'll click on an ad that's relevant to her or maybe a story. And with any luck, if the ad was crafted correctly or even the organic post was crafted correctly, it's led her to a website where there's some information involved that we can track and monitor and notice. What product did she look at? How long did she look at it? And if we're running paid advertising, it's an opportunity to retarget her with more content later in the day when she's back on her phone in the car rider line, scrolling through content once again. So this exercise, by imagining a person and what they may do, helps us then to turn that into a bigger system of opportunities to put our content out there so that lots of people who follow similar routines are coming across that content throughout their day pretty regularly. And that leads us to the next step in the hierarchy. So if you have established who you're talking to and where you want to be, we know that they're going to be consuming content pretty consistently, and we want to be active. So this leads us to the first question most people have when they decide that they want to start getting active on social media. And that is, how do I create enough content and how do I create it regularly? It can seem really daunting, but the two most powerful tools in your tool belt for making this a reality are going to be atomization and planning. So atomization is one of those buzzwords we like to use, but it's not scary. All it means is taking one idea or concept and breaking it apart into lots of smaller pieces of content that can be shared all over different platforms, through multiple channels, and in all kinds of different formats. So going back to the idea of our client in tourism, we want to think about the idea of, as an example, opening a new ride. That's one idea, one concept, and we're going to break that down into lots of different pieces of content through atomization. The very first thing that we would recommend doing in this instance is putting together a news release, because other people are going to want to know about this new ride and they're going to want to talk about it. So we want to give them some content to talk about. And this is really great because everything that they talk about online, we can also share and build on that conversation, which is just another aspect of atomization. Even if you're not starting with a news release, though, the other piece of long form content that can either come from a news release or that you could just write on your own would be a blog. So no matter the brand, if you have one product or one service or even one idea that you can write a blog about, now you can take each talking point that was mentioned in that blog and break it down into its own social media post. So you can post about the blog itself. You can post about the different talking points in the blog in a shorter format. Maybe you even choose to go live and chat through one of the questions that you saw come up consistently on your blog comments. There's lots of opportunity to take one idea and keep having those conversations, keep encouraging the chatter that's going to naturally take place on social media so that your brand is constantly re-engaging with your audience over that one original idea. If you go about your content creation in this way with atomization in mind, it's going to allow you to choose 3 or 4 concepts to atomize each month, which is going to make it much easier to feasibly think through how many different things you need to talk about over a longer period of time, say a quarter to 6 months to a year. It will help you create a reliable, achievable schedule for content that is going to be consistent and that is always going to have new ideas, but that's going to make sure that what you're talking about in one space, like Instagram, is at least in the ballpark of what you're talking about, say, on Facebook. Taking all of these great ideas and organizing them is how we create a content calendar, which is the second most important tool in content creation. This is going to help you plan ahead and think big picture, but give you enough structure that you then have the opportunity to break the rules or kind of pivot day to day if new things come up, if there's news in your industry or even in the world that you would like to weigh in on, if you've got a new product that maybe launched a little bit earlier than expected, or there's a certain quirky holiday that you feel like will really align with your brand values and tone of voice. This is a great time to deviate from the plan. And by having a plan, you're going to be able to feel a lot better about those deviations when they take place. There's a lot of tools for organizing your content in this way. You can even use a free version, which is basically just a template that's created in like an Excel sheet or a Google sheet as an example. And we actually will have an example of a content calendar that we sometimes use. It's really simple. It'll be in our resource guide you can take a look at. But there's also different other tools that make things even easier through auto publishing or with special analytics tools that you might be interested in at a lot of different price points. We'll have a few of those listed in our resource guide as well. But the main thing is just to take a look at what's out there and see what's going to be a comfortable next step for your brand so you can start getting organized. Social media is one of those things that is constantly changing, and the rules are always going to change as far as what's trendy, what's cool, what's not. But there's going to be some best practices that always ring true. I'm not going to read this whole list to you, but it will be here for you to take a look at and to reference as some quality best practices that are always going to be true for the most part. And the reason they're always going to be true is because they rely on being ethical and professional. So you want to think about where you're sourcing your content, how you're talking about your content, how you're being mindful of diversity and inclusion with your brand, and also how you make sure that you're not using content from other brands that doesn't really relate to you and you're staying true to your own content, your own self. So the last element that I want to talk about really quickly, because this is important for content creation, even though you may never have heard of it, and it's likely your audience is never going to notice that you're doing this, but that is search engine optimization, or SEO. So even though your audience may never realize that you have got an SEO strategy in your hip pocket for your content performance is really going to show where you are having consistent SEO in the strategy. So this is basically just the practice of evaluating the search terms and phrases that your audience and your customer types into that search bar, types into Google or social media to look for content, and making sure that you keep that in mind when you're writing the content for your brand. Your goal is to make your content more relevant and helpful to your audience, but also easier to find for the search engines. And social media really is a search engine. By having a consistent keyword strategy, so thinking about what they're typing into the search bar and how you can use those exact words and phrases in your content in a way that feels natural, by the way, is really going to be the most powerful, consistent thing you can do to make your content more and more relevant over time. So you want to think about this in the words that you choose for describing your content or your products, the words that you use in your posts themselves, the hashtags that you choose to utilize, and even the links and content on your website. You do want to be careful that you're using hashtags that are relevant to your brand and that have been researched, and not just a bunch of hashtags that maybe are kind of chosen at random or that just have something to do with a trend that's taking place currently and maybe not a lot about your brand. This is something called trend jacking, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about your brand's reputation management later on. But if you're using keywords correctly, it can be really powerful. So once again, there will be a lot of resources about SEO specifically in our resource guide if this is something you would like to take a deeper dive into. Some of these resources for keyword research include Google the Trends, Answer the Public, and Keywords Everywhere. But basically your goal is just to use tools, or even just by looking around on social media and seeing what you observe, to start to identify certain keywords or even hashtags that you think are going to be a good fit for you. You want to be taking a look at competition as well as relevancy to determine if they're going to be a good fit. Relevancy is pretty self-explanatory. Do you think that that keyword or hashtag has a lot to do with you or your product or your service or your brand? And if so, great. It's probably relevant, and you might want to think about including it in your content more often. The other factor is competition. And all that really means is how likely is it that someone else is also trying to use this keyword or hashtag or even key phrase in their content to kind of do the same thing. So an example of a high competition keyword is going to be something that's pretty general, or something that maybe is trending right then. So, hashtag great product, or, if you were around for the hashtag whipped coffee phase of quarantine, that was a trending tag at the moment. And these are going to be high competition. Now, if you're a coffee brand, that's great for you because you can use hashtag whipped coffee. It's both relevant and trending, perfect fit. It will be high competition, but it could be great for you. And then you want to pair with your high competition keywords, low competition keywords, which are going to be things that are either especially new or unique to you, and it's likely others are not using them as often. And that means that when a user sees that hashtag, if they click on it, or even if just subconsciously they notice it, they're going to associate it with you and see your content more clearly and more easily. A great example there is just going to be a hashtag or keyword that maybe is super unique to your brand name and identity. It could be a product or service that you've trademarked, or it could just be a concept that you have created and that no one else is really talking about right now. So by having a mix of these different types of keywords in your strategy, and once again, consistently over time, that's when you really start to see your audience really recognize your content and see it more often. And a lot of times that has to do with the fact that the platforms are also seeing your content more often, and they're placing it more often in the algorithm.
Great. So now you've determined your audience, the big players that you would like to be on, and how to create and plan out your content. We're going to discuss the next step of the hierarchy, which is being intentional, and how to control how your brand is perceived online. So when it comes to branding, consistency is key, especially with developing a social media presence. So the first tool we're going to talk about is leveraging your brand's tone and voice. So earlier we discussed the different audience metrics on each of the big players, and tone and voice is taking a deeper look into this and strategically mapping out how your content will be structured to match your brand. So to be more specific, your tone is an adjective that you would use to describe your brand. For instance, you could be funny, or you could be family oriented, or you can be more professional and business oriented. So your voice is directly related to things like your audience, the situation, and of course the platform that you're using. Basically, it's how you communicate your tone. So when it comes to consistency of your brand, it can become very heavy and time consuming mapping out this strategy, which is why some companies use what we call a social media style guide. This is seen a lot with nonprofits or national and global companies that have a lot of smaller companies who have their own social media presence. It's one way to ensure that your content will be structured in a consistent and efficient way to help you gain that new following, but also still creating that compelling and engaging content for them. Also, if you're part of a team or if you have multiple people working on creating and pushing out content, this can be a great tool for you. So the next tool that we're going to talk about is engaging employees as brand ambassadors. You can do this through fun ways like incentive programs and contesting where you reward them for maybe giving you the most likes or comments or shares, or you can take it a step further and actually use them in the content that you create, basically posting more office related stuff and helping them get engaged that way. So now that we've discussed some of these tools, we're going to show you what they might look like in action with some popular brand examples. Our first example is Apple, which of course is a technology company. And as somebody who's not in the technology company, it's definitely not something I would find super interesting. And Apple has found a unique way to not only promote their product, but also still engage their audience. And they do that by posting a lot of photos with the cameras of their iPhones. And with them, their tone is more like they're storytellers or they're creators or they're creative. So they're using that tone and they're using that platform to still promote their product. While Wendy's is a little different. Wendy's, their tone is more sarcastic and funny, and they communicate that through things like making jokes, or they'll even go as far as roasting their customers. And they've seen a lot of like success with that with millennials and Gen Zers. So those are just different ways of how to set a tone and communicate them. So we talked about how voice is how you communicate your tone, and a great example of how it changes with platforms is with Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola's tone could be considered maybe like more family oriented. And on Facebook, they ask their users maybe to share stories or who would they share a Coke with. They really get them engaged. While on Twitter, which is a microblogging website, they still have that family oriented tone, but how they communicate it is a little bit different. It's more relaxed, maybe a little less engaging. And basically, it's just a really good example about how you alternate your voice to match the platform. Our next examples are about encouraging employees and positioning them as brand ambassadors. So our first example is HubSpot, which on Instagram really has like an employee-centric content strategy. They do stuff like employee takeovers, or they ask their employees tips about their specific industries. And they've seen a lot of success with this. And Starbucks has actually taken it a step further and created a Starbucks partners page. And partners is what they call their employees. And they found that if they post a lot of content about their employees, they're not only able to connect their employees throughout different markets, but they're also able to get people really interested in being a part of their company. So now that we've talked about how to establish your brand and be more consistent with it, we're going to talk about how to manage your brand's reputation. So reputation management is the practice of proactively using a combination of social media monitoring and social listening to both protect and repair your brand online. So what is social media monitoring? What's social media listening? Social media monitoring is looking at what people are saying to you directly, while social media listening is a more proactive and research-heavy approach. It's basically looking at what people are saying about you indirectly. And an important note that we wanted to make is regardless of if you use a platform or not, your brand's reputation can still be at risk. A great example of this is with GameStop and Reddit. We saw over 3 million users were talking about GameStop on Reddit's platform. While we don't really know like GameStop's strategy with this, if they were on that platform, if they're active or not, it's just a great example about how even though a platform might seem niche to you, they still have like a lot of users on there, and just because whether or not you use it or not, your brand's reputation can be at risk. So now we're going to talk about some best practices to help you manage your brand's reputation online. The first two best practices we have are more about social media monitoring. So the first part of that is you want to make sure you're monitoring closely all comments, direct messages, and posts. This is important because these are how your followers and potential followers are communicating with you. So you want to make sure that you're active in that conversation, and not only active, but you also want to make sure you're responding both timely and respectfully to them. Also, Facebook does give you the option to hide or delete comments, and it's important to know when that's relevant to you. Basically, hiding a comment still allows the user who made the comment and the user's close followers to still see it. But if you delete the comment, nobody can see it. And if you are having like an issue, like a user is really disgruntled and you delete their comment, then they can come back and escalate the issue further. So sometimes it's always best to just hide a comment rather than delete it. And of course, instead of hiding or deleting, the best thing to do is, of course, to respond with them timely and respectfully, even if you're still mediating an issue. That's because like users care about, they want to make sure that you care what they think about you. So by doing this, you're showing them that you care and that you're working your hardest to try to mediate an issue. But the other half of that is whenever possible, you do want to take that conversation offline. That's because they don't need to see like the whole long drawn out process of how you're solving an issue. They just want to see that engagement and that you're trying. So whenever possible, you just want to ask them to either direct message you, to give you a call or email you or however you want to handle that situation, but you do just want to take it away from the public eye. So these best practices are more about social listening. So the first part of that is you want to make sure you're conducting regular searches for your brand online. And in those searches, you want to include things like your company name. You want to include things like common misspellings or maybe your high-level employees and of course your name. You also want to do searches for relevant keywords and hashtags. And you also want to look at your competitors. Your competitors' pages can give you some good insight on things like what your potential customers would care about. You might even see that they might already be talking about you on there, or maybe they're going through something with a company and you have the solution to that answer. So just by looking at your competitors, you can just gather a lot of great insight. So I definitely suggest it. The next part of social listening is paying close attention to things like review sites. You definitely want to cover the popular ones like Google My Business, Yelp, Yellow Pages, all of that. But you also want to be aware of any other industry relevant platforms. So a good example of this is like if you're in the wedding vendor industry, they have a lot of like niche platforms that act as review sites, and a lot of users are on there. They're either suggesting things or not suggesting things. So if they are talking about you, you definitely want to be a part of that conversation. Another part of this is that there are other sites out there that aggregate listings for you. And if you do have these aggregated listings out there, you want to be aware of them and make sure that information is accurate and people are leaving reviews that you're responding to them. So even though we do all of these things to create our brand and manage it and just keep it from bad things happening, stuff still happens. So we've tried to map out some tools for you to help with social media crises. I'll skip this slide. So some of these tools are, you want to make sure you're staying up to date with current events and how these events can impact the way that your content is seen by the public. This is very important because you could post something with the greatest intention, but if it's not at an appropriate time, it can be perceived in a completely different way. And there is no black and white answer to this, but you can ask yourself a couple questions to decide whether or not you should go dark. So some of these questions are, does your audience care? Do your employees care? Or will posting during this time come off as insensitive? If the answer to any of these questions are yes, then you might just want to consider either unscheduling your content and scheduling it for another day or just refrain from posting. Our next tip is to communicate with employees standards for personal social media accounts and to do this regularly. It's something we've seen a lot. Employees post something that doesn't really align with the company's brand standards. And because there's that connection between the employee and the brand, the company's brand becomes at risk, and starts getting attacked. So you just want to, whether you want to do it in like this long drawn out process or just a statement in your handbook or however you would like to do it, you just want to like communicate with them and you want to just make sure that you just keep bringing it up regularly. So some examples of like separating employees from the brand while still having that connection would be like reporters in their bios. You see stuff that's like, tweets don't equal endorsements, or retweets and likes don't equal endorsements. Or you'll also see like maybe people who are working for a company, they'll say something that's like, all the thoughts are my own, not of my institution, or something like that. It's just any way that you can separate that. You want to just try, just because like, especially if you're leveraging your employees as brand ambassadors, it's just something you need to be aware of. So some other tips that we have is going back to that style guide. You want to review it and you want to amend it often. We talked about how the social media landscape is always changing, and so is things like language. So you just want to make sure that it's up to current dates and it's up to your current standards, and you just want to keep it as a live document. Next, always fact check and review links before sharing. You know, we live in the age of misinformation and fake news, and you don't want that type of attention attracted to your brand. So it's just best practice for you to click on a link before you're sharing it and just look at the source, who wrote it, or the website, and just make sure it's something that's appropriate for you to share. Next, practice social listening and social monitoring. Not only is it a great tool and just a great rule of thumb, but also like if something were to happen, it will give you some benchmarks basically. So if you're starting off and, you know, most of your social media presence is positive and if something bad were to happen, you have that benchmark to help you see where you're at and then and where you are at now, and it'll help you get back on track with that. Next, you want to be cautious when trend jacking. Trend jacking is a great tool when used appropriately, but when it's used inappropriately, it can be seriously harmful for your brand. So like some good examples of it being used appropriately would be commenting on a trending article on LinkedIn, or hopping in on like a trending hashtag that's related to your industry or any of those keywords. Basically, if you can add to the conversation, then you should add to it, but you don't ever just want to be doing these things just to raise awareness to get like bigger reach for your content. Next, be honest and transparent and timely with any responses. I know that we said timely and respectfully earlier, but this be honest and transparent goes a lot further than just your responses. Is when you create your content, it's when you are messaging customers or whether you're replying back to them. In all of your practices on social media, you just want to be honest and transparent. And if you are going through something that could be considered a social media crisis, or even before it gets to that point, you don't ever want to be caught in a lie because it'll escalate things a lot further. And then lastly, which is personally my favorite one, watch and learn from other brands and companies. Since we are living in the social media age and we're able to see all these things happen while they happen, we're able to take lessons and learn from other people, whether they're going through social media crises in the moment, or whether they wrote out a case study or doing what we're doing now, which is a webinar. We're able to take these lessons and implement them in our strategy to help us avoid the things that people have already gone through. So I just want to encourage you to just keep that as a practice and top of mind, just to take some lessons away from people, which also really leads us into the last step of the hierarchy, which Kelsey's going to talk about, and that is being a leader.
Yes. So we have reached the top. If we have been scaling this hierarchy, we've done the most important things first, which is to be present and be active. And we feel pretty consistent, like we've got a good handle on our brand reputation management and what that looks like. The last step is to see how we can elevate the experience of our audience on social media by positioning ourselves as leaders. Thought leadership is about consistently showing up as a trendsetter. If you want to get the reputation of being a who's who, then you need to make sure that you are always up to date with what's going on, the latest and greatest. So if a new channel comes out on Instagram, which I'm sure it will probably next week, they're always coming out with new ones, you want to try it out. You want to see what's going on, and you want to make sure that you are demonstrating that you're not scared to try new formats. You want to show that you're keeping your ear to the ground with industry news, whether that is news in general or things that are very, very specific to the category that you're in or the products that you provide. And you want to be highly responsive to discussions in your community. So if there's a hot new trend and everybody's giving their takes on it, add your thoughts to the mix. Show your customers that you have thoughts about those things, that you are aware of those new content, the new conversations that are happening, and that they can look to you as an authority in that space when they're still not sure what they think yet. You want to make sure that you're trying and failing often. Do not be scared to do this. Reid Hoffman, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, is pretty famous for saying, if you're not embarrassed about the first version of your product, you launch too late. And social media is a great opportunity to try that out in a lower risk environment, because content's constantly coming out that's newer, because there's constantly new channels to try. People are a lot more forgiving now more than ever with your content. And if you try something out and maybe the production quality wasn't as high as you would have hoped, or you just felt like the format wasn't a great fit for your brand, that's actually okay. Part of being a thought leader is experimenting with those new concepts. And that is really what's going to show how you are a trendsetter. That's going to show how, even if it doesn't always stick, you're always willing to try. Friends, social media is a fantastic sandbox for new voices, products, and ideas. You can utilize things like polls and A/B tests and keep an eye on your analytics to see what's working and what's not. And then, just in the same way that you want to try things often, don't be scared to just stop a content series if you feel like it's not really going in the direction that you wanted. And lastly, to be a leader, do not forget that social media is social. You want to be sure that you're engaging with your community and with other complementary brands in your space. You want to make sure that you're having a conversation and you're not just putting content out there about your brand, about yourself all the time. You want to make sure that there's something of a dialogue between yourself and your customers and just your community in general. Some really fun crossover techniques for this are things like shout outs, sponsorships. You could do some influencer partnerships, which can be anything from sending out some free product and hoping that they engage with that and put it out there for you, or even approaching that in a more formal way, which is something we help people with at the agency all the time. You can practice takeovers with complementary brands and influencers, and you can participate in events in your community, and then make sure that that conversation circles back online by talking about the event, engaging with event content that maybe the event hosts have put out there, or even hosting your own event. And above all else, remember to have fun. If you've established that consistency, if you have established the professionalism that you need for brand control, people love to see you having fun with your brand and with your products and with your presence online. And so the more that you can play around with that, the more people are going to see that confidence in your brand and in your presence naturally. And they're really going to want to keep an eye on what's going on with you. So thank you so much for listening to that. I know we rapid fire went through lots of concepts with social media. There is a lot to consider. Hopefully the hierarchy made it a little bit easier to approach all of those different facets. But if you have any questions about anything that we went over today, or if you want to dive deeper into any of these different aspects of the hierarchy and of what you can do on social, we would love to talk with you. Yeah, thanks, Shahela. She's got our contact information right here. Shoot us an email, come to office hours, send us questions. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer right now, I do think we have a little bit of time. So feel free to drop it in the chat, or maybe raise your hand. I will let our moderators decide how they'd like to handle some questions if you have any.
Yes, if y'all have any questions about anything, feel free to just drop them in the chat. I guess we'll give everyone just a minute or two to hold on. But while they're doing that, thank you so much, Shakayla. And Kristen, thank you guys so much. Kelsey, I'm so sorry. I was thinking of Kristen for some reason. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This is super, super helpful. Just a reminder, this is one of 4 webinars that will be happening throughout the rest of the month. And so we've got 3 more for this month and then 4 in April. And those will be on our social medias. We will also be sending them out as email blasts, and look out on our April newsletter for all of those dates as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, but Shakayla will send out their info, and you guys are always welcome to reach out to the Women's Foundation as well to get in touch with MHP. Thank you guys, appreciate y'all.
Thank you for having us.